Hey, welcome back to Boss Economics World, where we shine a spotlight on the economic dumpster fires our so-called leaders keep igniting, all while they pat themselves on the back for their genius. I'm Boss, the guy who's been screaming into the void about bad policy since the days of dial-up internet, and today, oh boy, do we have a doozy for you. Buckle up, folks, because President Trump's latest tariff tantrum on auto imports is the kind of economic facepalm that'll have you questioning whether anyone in Washington has ever cracked open an econ textbook, or, looked at a history book. Spoiler alert, they haven't. Let's set the stage, shall we? On March 26, 2025, President Donald Trump signed a proclamation slapping a shiny new 25% tariff on auto imports, proudly declaring it a cornerstone of his grand plan to bring manufacturing jobs back to the USA. According to Trump, this is all about protecting American workers, sticking it to those pesky foreign countries, stealing our jobs, and raking in a cool $100 billion in annual revenue. Sounds like a win, right? Wrong. This is the economic equivalent of trying to fix a leaky pipe with a flamethrower. Sure, it's dramatic, but you're going to burn the house down. Now, if you're one of our loyal viewers, shout out to the finance nerds, the Wall Street warriors, and the everyday folks who've been following our rants about fiscal fiascos. You know we don't just swallow the government's talking points like a spoonful of sugar. Oh no, we dig into the data, we peel back the layers, and we expose the ugly truth behind the sound bites. So, grab your coffee, or something stronger, you'll need it, and let's break down this tariff travesty from the surface-level PR spin to the deep, dark economic abyss it's dragging us into. Let's start with the surface, because that's where the White House wants you to stay. Trump's big pitch is that these tariffs will bring back American manufacturing jobs, particularly in the auto sector. He's painting a rosy picture of factories springing up across the Rust Belt, workers clocking in with smiles, and the good old USA reclaiming its industrial glory. And hey, who doesn't love a feel-good story? The United Auto Workers, UAW, even gave a thumbs up, with President Sean Fain claiming this move will end the race to the bottom in the auto industry. Sounds like a win for the little guy, right? But hold your applause, folks, because this is where the spin starts to unravel faster than a cheap suit. The idea that tariffs magically create jobs is the kind of economic fairy tale that only works if you ignore, well, reality. Let's talk about what's actually happening here. First off, let's get one thing straight, tariffs are a tax. Not on foreign countries, as Trump loves to imply, but on American consumers and businesses. When you slap a 25% tariff on imported cars and parts, you're not charging countries for doing business, you're charging American companies and, ultimately, American buyers. And guess what? Higher costs don't exactly scream job creation. Take the auto industry, for example. North America's auto supply chain is so interconnected that even American cars are a global patchwork. According to the Center for Automotive Research, CR, about 40% of the parts in a typical U.S. assembled vehicle are imported, often crossing borders multiple times during production. General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis, the so-called Big Three, rely heavily on parts from Mexico and Canada, thanks to the USMCA trade deal Trump himself championed. Now, with these new tariffs, even USMCA-covered vehicles will face levies on their non-U.S. content. Translation: higher production costs for everyone, even the American brands. And here's the kicker, higher costs don't lead to more jobs, they lead to fewer. A 2024 study by the Peterson Institute for International Economics, PIAE, found that Trump's earlier tariffs on steel and aluminum, remember those, actually cost the U.S. economy about 175,000 manufacturing jobs by raising input costs and triggering retaliatory tariffs from trading partners. Fast forward to 2025, and this auto tariff is set to do the same, but on steroids. Analysts at CR estimate that these new tariffs could increase the cost of producing a U.S.-made crossover vehicle by $4,000 and a U.S.-made electric vehicle, EV, by a whopping $12,000. That's not job creation, folks, that's a recipe for layoffs, factory closures, and a big fat "for sale" sign on the American dream. Now, let's talk about you, the consumer. You know, the folks Trump claims to be fighting for. If you're in the market for a car, buckle up, because your wallet's about to take a beating. According to a 2024 report by the American Automotive Policy Council, AAPC, U.S. car and light truck imports were valued at over $240 billion last year. Slap a 25% tariff on that, and you're looking at tens of billions in added costs, most of which will be passed straight to you, the buyer. Analysts at Cox Automotive estimate that the average price of a new car in the U.S., already hovering around $48,000 in 2024, could jump by $3,000 to $7,000, depending on the model. And don't think you're safe if you buy American. Even U.S.-made vehicles will see price hikes, thanks to the tariffs on imported parts like engines, transmissions, and electrical components. Want a Ford Maverick or a Jeep Compass? Tough luck, those are built in Mexico, and their prices are going up. Even Ford's Bronco Sport, proudly made in America, relies on a supply chain that stretches across the border, so don't be surprised when the sticker price spikes. And here's the real gut punch: these price hikes come at a time when American consumers are already reeling from inflation. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, inflation in 2024 averaged 3.2%, with transportation costs, including cars, rising even faster. Now, Trump's tariffs are set to pour gasoline on that fire, just as the Federal Reserve is trying to cool things down with higher interest rates. Speaking of which, the Fed's latest projections, March 2025, suggest that these tariffs could push inflation back above 4% by Q3 2025, forcing even tighter monetary policy. Higher prices, higher borrowing costs, and a weaker economy, sounds like a winning formula, right? Now, let's zoom out to the global stage, because Trump's tariff tantrum isn't happening in a vacuum. Remember, folks, tariffs are a two-way street, and other countries aren't exactly known for rolling over and saying, thanks for the economic punch in the face. Oh no, they retaliate, and they retaliate hard. Take Canada, for instance. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney called these tariffs a direct attack on Canadian auto workers, and Ontario Premier Doug Ford is already promising to inflict as much pain as possible on the US without hurting Canadians. What does that mean? It means Canada, which buys about 60% of US-made vehicles, according to Autos Drive America, could slap retaliatory tariffs on American cars, making them pricier for Canadian buyers and killing US export jobs. And Canada's not alone. Japan, Germany, and South Korea, all major US trading partners, are likely to follow suit. The European Commission's Ursula von der Leyen has already signaled the EU is ready to safeguard its economic interests, which is diplomatic speak for get ready for a trade war. We've seen this movie before, folks. Back in 2018, Trump's steel and aluminum tariffs triggered retaliatory levies from the EU, Canada, and China, costing US exporters billions. According to the U.S. International Trade Commission, ITC, U.S. agricultural exports alone took a $27 billion hit from 2018 to 2019, thanks to China's retaliatory tariffs on soybeans, pork, and other goods. Fast forward to 2025, and we're about to see a sequel, only this time it's bigger, badder, and with even more collateral damage. Here's where the rubber really meets the road, folks. Trump's tariffs aren't just bad policy, they're a one-way ticket to Recessionville. Let's connect the dots. Higher tariffs mean higher costs for businesses, which means higher prices for consumers. Higher prices erode purchasing power, which slows consumer spending, the lifeblood of the U.S. economy, accounting for about 70% of GDP, per the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis, 2024. Slower spending means slower growth, and when you throw in tighter Fed policy to combat tariff-driven inflation, you've got a classic recipe for a downturn. Don't take my word for it, look at the data. A 2024 study by the National Bureau of Economic Research, NBR, found that Trump's 2018 tariffs reduced U.S. GDP by 0.2% and cost over 142,000 jobs. Now, with these new auto tariffs, and even broader, reciprocal tariffs set to hit on April 2, 2025, the damage could be far worse. Goldman Sachs economists estimate that a full-blown trade war could shave 1.5% off U.S. GDP by 2026, pushing unemployment from its current 4.1%, BLS, March 2025, to over 6%. And that's not even counting the ripple effects on global growth, with the IMF already warning that escalating trade tensions could cut global GDP by 0.8% in 2025. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the government's management, or should I say, mismanagement, of this whole fiasco. Look, folks, bad policy doesn't happen by accident. It happens because our so-called leaders prioritize political theater over economic reality. Trump's tariffs aren't about fixing the economy, they're about scoring political points, pandering to a base that's been fed a steady diet of protectionist propaganda. And who's paying the price? You, me, and every American worker, consumer, and business owner. What's even more infuriating is that the government has the tools to address economic challenges without resorting to this tariff nonsense. Want to boost manufacturing? Try investing in workforce training, cutting red tape, or offering targeted tax incentives, policies that actually work, as evidenced by the CHIPS and Science Act of 2022, which has already spurred $200 billion in private semiconductor investment, per the Semiconductor Industry Association, 2024. Want to reduce trade deficits? How about negotiating smarter trade deals instead of blowing up the ones we have, like the USMCA, which Trump himself signed? But no, instead of real solutions, we get this tariff circus, propped up by White House spin doctors who think $100 billion in new revenue is some kind of victory. Newsflash, folks, that revenue is coming out of your pockets, and it's going straight into the government's coffers to fund more of their harebrained schemes. Meanwhile, the real cost, lost jobs, higher prices, and a looming recession, is left for us to clean up. So, where does this leave us, folks? In a word, screwed. Trump's auto tariffs, and the broader trade war they're igniting, are a masterclass in economic self-sabotage. They won't bring back jobs, they'll kill them. They won't help consumers, they'll hammer them. And they won't make America stronger, they'll make us poorer, weaker, and more isolated on the global stage. But hey, don't just take my word for it. Look at the markets. Shares of GM, Ford, and Stellantis tanked in after-hours trading the moment Trump opened his mouth. Look at the data. Every credible economic study, from the PIIE to the NBR, says tariffs do more harm than good. And look at history. Every time we've tried this protectionist playbook, from the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930 to Trump's own 2018 trade wars, it's ended in disaster. So, here's my message to Washington: stop playing economic roulette with our livelihoods. Stop pretending tariffs are some kind of magic bullet. And for the love of all that is holy, start listening to the experts, the data, and the people who actually understand how the economy works. Because if you don't, the only Liberation Day we'll be celebrating is the day we liberate ourselves from this policy nightmare. And that, folks, is your economic wake-up call, courtesy of Boss Economics World. If this tariff tantrum has you as fired up as I am, smash that like button, share this video with everyone you know, and let's keep the pressure on these clowns in Washington. Until next time, keep your wallets close and your skepticism closer. This is Boss Economics World, signing off.